things advance, right? All right, continuing our look at Jesus Said What, looking at the hard words of Jesus. This week, we're going to look at Luke 12, 1 through 7, where Jesus says to fear God, and especially kind of a fear God, fear the one who can send you to hell more than the ones who can destroy the body. So, could someone read this for us, please?
In the meantime, when so many thousands of the people had gathered together that they were trampling one another, Jesus began to say to his disciples, first, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy. Nothing is covered up that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. Therefore, whatever you have said in the dark shall be heard in the light, and what you have whispered in private rooms shall be proclaimed on the housetops. I tell you, my friends, do not fear those who kill the body, and after that have nothing more that they can do. But I will warn you whom to fear. Fear him who, after he has killed, has authority to cast into hell. Yes, I tell you, fear him. Are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 pennies, and not one of them is forgotten before God? Why, even the hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear not, you are of more value than many sparrows. Why? Okay.
All right, there we go. Oh. All right. So as we're talking here about fearing God, any initial thoughts, reactions, comments to that passage? Probably, especially focusing on verse 5.
Well, you think of God as love, but yet...
Right. Yeah, God is love. And yet you need to fear him because he can send you to hell. Right.
Is that the fear that it's meant to mean?
Well, we'll go through that and check and see. But there's a bit of normal fear in there, but there's some other nuances to it, I think, as we go through that'll be important to note too. All right, any other initial thoughts? All right. So again, first off, one of the reasons Jesus is saying to fear God is because he could fear the one who can send you to hell. So what does he mean by hell? Well, there's 2 words that are translated as hell in the New Testament. First one's Gehenna, the valley of the sons of Hinnom, a burning trash heap outside of Jerusalem. You can see this nice valley here outside of Jerusalem, still present to this day. But according to some ancient sources, it was kind of a perpetually burning trash heap. There's some debate about that, but that's at least the normal, traditional kind of understanding of it. And then also, though, even if it's got a bad reputation for that, but it's especially got a bad reputation because Ahaz and Manasseh, 2 wicked kings, offered their sons as sacrifices there in fire. And so that was following the precepts of some of the surrounding pagan gods, the Canaanite deities, demanding child sacrifice. And so that's part of what Jesus is talking about when he says Gehenna, or when he says hell. Sometimes it's this Gehenna place, and everyone would have recognized what this is, where this means, because of the bad reputation there for both things. All right. And then other times we get it's translated as Hades, which is just the underworld in Greek and Roman mythology, just the abode of the dead. And so those 2 places kind of get this place of fire and evil and judgment, and also then this place of the dead are kind of the 2 main things we're talking about when we're talking about hell here. All right. Any thoughts, questions, comments on that?
Those are the only 2 references to hell.
Those are the 2 words that are translated generally translated as hell in the New Testament. So, all right. Then we're talking about fear of God. Of course, we're good Lutherans. We got to go to this, right? You'll remember this. You shall have first commandment. You shall have no other gods. What does this mean? We should fear, love, and trust in God above all things. Right? All right. So, what kind of fear is that when you were in confirmation class? Honor. Okay, that's one understanding of it. So,
Ultimate respect.
oh, respect. Yep. Awe. Yep. Yeah, that recognition that this is, you're in the presence of God, and that's not something that's happens ordinarily. That, one of the recognitions that when we were talking about fearing God, it's just that recognition that we often don't, because we don't necessarily have that reverence, that respect, that awe coming into the presence of God. I've shared this in sermons before, but it's a quote by Annie Dillard. On the whole, I do not find us sufficiently sensible to what is going on when we gather together for worship. Does anyone have the foggiest idea of what sort of power we so blithely invoke when we do? We should all be wearing crash helmets. Ushers should issue life preservers and signal flares. They should lash us to our pews. For the sleeping God may wake someday and take offense, or the waking God may draw us out to where we can never return. So again, that idea that of approaching God in reverence, in awe, is something that we often don't have as much of as they did in that time. Throughout the Old Testament and even parts of the New, and some of that's because of what Jesus did and our understanding of that, but some of it's also we tend to not be as reverent or formal in our culture in many ways. I see. I mean, there's a couple of you wearing suits, but you wear that on Sunday morning. You're not wearing that to Cardinals game, or all your college students are not showing up to lecture in their shirt and ties. If you do that, it's those special things, and even then, we talk about business attire. You don't have as much of that anymore. That had been going down for a bit, and now everyone's working from home in pajamas. And so dress codes don't necessarily matter as much, and so there's kind of that irrelevance, lack of awe there. Every so often you hear about people complain that people you're wearing suits, but not everyone who comes to church does. Some of that's just our college students, and we're glad and happy if they're showing up in PJs, they're showing up, but. There was a day when you wouldn't even think about showing up in wearing some of those things, and you've got that even more so when you're talking about, well, we got to go into the temple and to be consecrated and cleansed and offer sacrifices, and so we're coming into the presence of God, and we know. Well, God struck down that guy who even, touched the Ark of the Covenant wrong. Yeah, that's right. We get the stories of the priest. The priest goes into the Holy of Holies once a year. And there's the tradition that they've got the rope tied around them so they can get pulled out if they mess up, and so no one. So you've got that fear of God that we don't have, that they certainly would have had.
We definitely don't think of it that way at all,
right.
Anyway.
Yeah. And then in general, the idea, God is love. Why would God judge me? God just wants everyone. Well, as we just heard today, in John 3:16, God so loved the world. And ignore anything of judgment. God doesn't want to. God won't judge me. God just wants me to be happy.
One of the things too in the Bible, God was more visible than He is, today, and I think that's a difference too.
Right. Yeah, and that's that can play into it in a couple different ways. So the fancy theological words for these, since I have to use these words to prove I went to seminary every now and then, are immanence and transcendence. That immanence is how close God is to us, transcendence is how far away God is from us. That in Jesus God is immanent, God is physically with his people and close. Transcendence, God's up in heaven, far away, just ruling over everything that way. But in that tension, there's certainly different aspects of that too. If God's more visible, if you've seen this pillar of cloud leading you by day and pillar of fire by night, you probably, or seeing God do the plagues, that fear of God should be there. Of course, then as Pastor Mark said, the Israelites start complaining about not having any food. Where's the garlic and the leeks and the cucumbers that we had when we were in the in Egypt, along the Nile and the Delta, that very fertile region, and now we're wandering around the Sinai Peninsula that doesn't have a whole lot of anything. So even fearing God, God's power, there's still that tendency to grumble and complain. And
Alan, who's more liable to pray for good weather, you or a lot of the rest of us?
What was that?
Who's more liable to pray for good weather, you or most of the rest of us?
Good weather is relevant to,
Why?
well, because that's my life.
You're a farmer, right? So you see a real strong connection between your livelihood and God, right?
Sure.
How about for the rest of us? By the time we get food on the table, there's been all kinds of intermediary steps. And we don't think about God.
No.
We have replaced so much of our God thought with our technology and things like that. I mean, it used to be when you had bad weather, you had to tough it out. Now, we've got our cars to drive in, we've got our air conditioning and our heat. So we're not thinking of God, in the same way and attributing things. Back in ancient times, anything beyond you attributed to God, and now, we know what causes lightning. It's not some God being mad. We know, and so it makes it harder to fear God because of that.
That further disconnect from God and direct interactions there because of our technology and advancements, things. Yes, it's great that God can use people in their vocations to get from the grain, the farmer's grain, to give us our daily bread on our table. But there's a few more intermediate steps in between that we don't see as much of as when you actually had the farmer grew the grain. Well, then the person who grew the grain, the person who ground it into flour, the person who baked the bread, the person who sold it to you in the store. Now, I don't know the guy who put my loaf of bread in a plastic baggie with a zip tie or anything like that. So, but definitely that goes along with it too, I think. So harder for us to fear God just because we're kind of disconnected, and we think we're self-sufficient because we have all this technology. Right. And so then when things go wrong with technology, then that might send us into trusting God more, but it doesn't always happen. Well, like Pastor Mark mentioned, after 9/11, people prayed because they recognized something outside of our control. We can't handle this. Had a little bit of that, some of that too, 4 years ago, as things started shutting down. But that there's again that recognition. Science can't solve everything. What are we doing to handle? What can we do? And fearing God is, again, something that used to be easier to do, and now we try to write it off as much as possible. All right, but part of what Jesus is doing here then is the focus is on God's authority, I think, ultimately in fearing God. And recognize God's in control. As one of my systematics professors in seminary said, God is God, you're not. That you just summarize things that way. God is God, you are not. So focuses on God's authority. God has the authority to send people to hell. But as we heard in the gospel lesson today, God wants everyone to believe in Jesus and have eternal life. So other things, what does it mean to fear God? Well, like Psalm 33:8, let all the earth fear the Lord, let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him, going along with that awe aspect of fearing God that we talked about a little earlier. All right. And then also, again, as we remember, as we're hearing these hard sayings of Jesus, trying to figure out what he means, how we understand it, look at the context. Who's Jesus dealing with? And who's he talking to here?
Looks like the Pharisees.
The Pharisees. Yes, what's happening? Jesus is saying to his disciples, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy. We see that a little bit. You can, see in that window there, the parable of the Pharisee and the publican. Pharisee and the tax collector. What's the difference there? The hypocrisy of the Pharisee. I thank God I'm so wonderful, and I'm not like that guy. And the tax collector just comes fully and says, "I'm, God, be merciful to me, a sinner."
We're that way today. Everybody has their phone and said, Facebook and all that.
Yeah.
Look at me. Look what I've done.
That's the studies of social media, especially for younger kids. I mean, the fact that people have access to things, so rumors happen that things that they could leave at school and go home and escape, they can't anymore. That you have people posting things, a very filtered, curated aspect. So it's all the best things and never not the problems. So look how wonderful my life is, and my life, and then kids look at that and go, well, wait, my life isn't as good as other people's life. So definitely a lot of that putting up faces things, or even comes up with. Recognize, there's no way you'd ever say to someone's face some of the things that people say to each other on social media. One bad basketball game and some of those players, they'll shut down their Twitter account. All right. All right, so then, again, so context here, again, Jesus is teaching his disciples, teaching against what the Pharisees are doing. And we kind of saw that in Matthew 6, which we talk about the beginning of Lent on Ash Wednesday, where we talk about things. The almsgiving, prayer, and fasting is kind of the three traditions of Lent, and Jesus will say that. Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them, is kind of his overarching theme as he's talking about those sorts of things. When you pray, don't pray like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. The hypocrisy there, that idea, well, you're praying to talk to God, but are you praying to talk to God, or are you praying so that other people see you talking to God, and then think you're good and holy and pious and righteous and all those things? And when you fast, don't look somber as the hypocrites do, for they disfigure their faces to show others they are fasting. What are you giving up for New Year's or Lent? And well, let me tell you about it, because I'm going to post on social media all the time. Look how wonderful I'm doing in doing these things.
Look how I'm suffering.
Look how I'm suffering.
I want you to be able to tell.
Right. All right. So again, also then, part of what Jesus is telling his disciples here, in the context of dealing with the Pharisees and their hypocrisy, is it's not just about fearing God and recognizing his authority, but paying more attention to what God thinks and less attention to what people think. That if you're doing those things for the recognition, well, you've received your reward. But if you're doing these things for yourself, if you're doing these things to improve your relationship with God, that's a whole other thing.
It's kind of a runaway train right now
Yeah.
for everyone, for the young, for
Yeah.
everybody that's developing. They're taken over by this runaway train.
You're not posting about your golf games, though, are you, Gary? That'll just keep you on. But yeah, no, I mean, there's all those different things, yeah, that we can do for attention-seeking behaviors in a lot of ways. All right. And so ultimately, then, focusing on what God thinks of us and not what others think of us helps us to understand our identity. A few chapters later, when we get to Transfiguration, well, Jesus knows who he is. He's, the voice comes from the cloud, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." So Jesus knows fully who he is. He's not a hypocrite. He doesn't have to try and show off and make other people care about him. If he was trying to win friends and influence people, some of the things he says to the Pharisees probably not going too well. People start following after him, and then he starts going, "Well, I'm the bread of life. You need to eat me." And they go like, "Wait, what?" Or we talked about last week, the rich young man. It should be easy for Jesus to say, "Sure, follow me. Look, I've got this. Look at this influencer who's following me. He's young. He's wealthy. He's probably handsome. If he likes me, then all you others should like me too." And no, Jesus goes, "No, okay, you've kept the commandments. Then we'll go sell all your stuff and then follow me." And the guy goes away sad. So Jesus knew who he was and what his purpose was, and his focus was on God's will. Yep. And then also context matters too. We talk about fearing God, but flip side, immediately after that warning that the condemnation of God is to be feared comes the encouragement that the protecting love of God is to be trusted. So we start talking about the sparrows and things. Because again, you've got sort of a law and gospel where that Jesus you need to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. Point out people's hypocrisy, but recognize that there are people who are well aware of their own hypocrisy, who are well aware of their own failings, and they need to be reminded of God's love for them too. That as insignificant as they feel, God cares for the sparrows that are 5 for 2. It sounds like a good sale. 5 sparrows for 2 pennies, and but God keeps track of them. God keeps track of all the hairs on your head. God will keep track of you too. Yeah, not one sparrow is forgotten by God. All right. Any thoughts? Other thoughts, questions, comments before we get into the discussion questions? All right. Some individuals and church bodies, they get offended by this. Well, it's because they don't think there's a hell. What's your response to that viewpoint?
Well, I want to say the Bible says so, but I'm not sure of the Bible. How clear and concise and repeatedly it's.
Yeah, I mean, there's a place of eternal separation. There's a place of punishment prepared for the devil and his demons that then, others
like
get
fire,
sent. Yeah.
various things.
Anything else?
Well, I guess you think of if God is such this loving God, he would never send people to that place.
Right.
But yet he is pretty clear that there is a place like that. And it talks about, the people who were in hell and they wanted God to, or that guy to save his brothers.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's always the challenge, looking at that parable of the rich man and Lazarus, where Jesus is talking about that. And, just because Jesus says it in a parable doesn't mean it's fully accurate. You don't fully build doctrines off of that. Kind of like, if you go on a tour of the Holy Land, you don't get, when the tour guides point out, that's where the Good Samaritan helped the guy. Yes, it's on the road to Jericho, so you can figure that part out. But as far as that being specific spot, it's a parable. Didn't necessarily actually happen.
What particular church bodies reject?
That's it. I mean, specifically, Universalists would be the big one. I mean, the Unitarian Universalist churches there, Highland, would say there isn't a hell. But then there's that tendency in more mainline liberal church bodies to think that there isn't one at all. There's a non-denominational pastor named Rob Bell about 10, 12 years ago who wrote a book called Love Wins, and it was essentially that idea that, ultimately, so our sins are what would send us to hell, but Jesus died on the cross, and so then, love God, God, why would a loving God do this? Jesus' death defeated everything, so therefore everyone goes to heaven. Would be essentially the idea. Yeah.
So then you can do what you want while you're living, then, because God's already.
I mean, there's some of that idea of you can just do what you want without worrying about the consequences. Others use it as a inspiration for helping people on earth as we want to make this as close to what we're going to experience, what everyone's going to experience in eternity. So we need to make sure this is heaven's a place on earth. We hear 80 songs on that. So, but it's so that we focus on that too. That idea that making heaven on earth, because there wouldn't be hell. Yeah, Norm.
Yeah, we've got a contemporary hymn, In Christ Alone, that has a line in it, on the cross as Jesus died, the wrath of God was satisfied. And there was a mainline Christian denomination that contacted the composers and wanted to change wrath of God to love of God. And the composers refused. So to me, that kind of fits in with
right. That idea that that on the cross as Jesus died, the wrath of God was satisfied. That idea that why would God's wrath have to be satisfied? God's love can just poof, fix everything. So, so we need to change those words. And
In the end, when God describes the judgment, he talks about the sheep and the goats.
Right.
What question do they ask Jesus as judge? Do they have any doubts about why they're going one place or the other? Is that what they express? No, what they express is, Lord, when did we see you hungry? And those kinds of things. In the end, yes, we do get God's judgment if we don't want to trust him, but also really what we get is we got what we want. If a person doesn't want God in this world, they're not going to get him in eternity. Because if God is with them, they don't want him. They don't want him. You get what you want in the end. That's what hell is about. You're separate from God. That's what you want.
yeah, kind of either at the end God says, either you say to God, thy will be done, or God says to you, well, your will be done.
Yeah. So to say that there isn't hell and so forth is saying, well, then people are going to be forced to do what they want in eternity, to be with God, to love God. They don't want it. They don't want it.
All right. Again, kind of touched on this too. Yeah, some have asserted that a loving God couldn't possibly sentence people to an eternity of torment. How do you reconcile the existence of God and the existence of hell? I think we've kind of touched on saying, well, that's part of God says it. Partly that, God, hell especially is that separation from God that people want here on earth, so God gives that to them.
And remember the story of the people in hell and heaven? They're both sitting in front of a banquet table, but the people in hell are starving because the utensils are too large to put in their mouth. In heaven, they're celebrating because they're using the utensils to feed the person across the table. There was a famous Twilight song about a guy who thinks he's a criminal, dies and goes to heaven because he can do anything he wants. He gambles, he wins, he gets everything, and finally, in the end, it drives him crazy, and he says, I don't want this, I want to go to the other place, if this is heaven. And his host laughed and said, this is the other place. What makes hell a torment is the fact that God's not there.
All right. The word heaven appears 463 times in the Bible, although admittedly a lot of those are, Jesus introduces parables with the kingdom of heaven is like kind of thing. Word hell appears 14 times. Why do you think hell receives such little mention?
God would have all to be saved.
God would have all to be saved, right? I mean, so
I mean,
kind of
that's
that, right. They need a lot more care and not as much stick, kind of.
Well, in the Old Testament, what does heaven mean, though?
Right. Well, true. Yeah.
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth.
Yeah. And so we get a lot of that too. The heavens being just the
That's not referring
the
to
skies
heaven.
above, right.
We're gonna be with
Yep.
heaven. So a lot of the Old Testament reference to heaven is not heaven.
It's heavens. It's where the stars are and the sky above, that kind of thing too. So, all right. Most people struggle with how others perceive them. A few people don't care what anyone thinks about them. How can our concern about what others think of us work for good in our lives, though?
Do you want to be a good influencer or a bad one?
You want to be a good, okay, yeah. So, that idea that, people are looking up to you in a variety of ways or circumstances, and so you want to live up to that, to those expectations. If you're a parent, you want your kids to kind of look up to you, so you want to live up to those expectations. If you're a teacher or a boss, you want those under you to look up to you. So that in those ways, what people think of you can be a positive influence that way in trying to live up to that. Any other thoughts?
I think that it helps show others that if they're needing somebody to talk to listen, to help in some way, that you're there for them. And if they don't see you that way, they're not going to approach you.
Yeah, so you need people to, if you want to help people, if you want people to feel you're approachable, you have to actually act and be approachable. In any number of ways. Yeah, if you want to be a good listener, you have to, and want to be seen as that, you have to practice that. What is it? It was a Dale Meyer minute a few weeks ago. Reminder that no one cares what a friend they have in Jesus until they know what a friend they have in you. So that idea, again, how people look up to you, how people that can be a positive thing. That's not that can have positive influence. But when does concern about what others think become a problem?
Well, if you're not in the in crowd that's doing things, sometimes that can cause people to be, have issues, mental problems.
Yeah. I'm not in the in crowd, so I need to do what I can to get in the in crowd, or my sense of self-worth is decreasing because I'm not in the in crowd. Yeah. Okay, that's part of it. Good. Any other thoughts?
consume you, I guess.
Oh yeah, you can let it consume you. What other people think about you. That becomes worrisome, causes anxiety, that kind of thing. Definitely can be a
Yeah,
problem.
forces you into maybe doing something you wouldn't ever have done.
Right.
Normally, but now you're doing it.
Yep.
For me to associate with that person, even though they need help.
Yeah, you want to be associated with those people, so you need to do all those things. And yeah, in many places, Bible says to fear God. How would you explain what it means to fear God? We kind of touched on it at the beginning with awe and respect and honor and reverence. Anyone have anything else to add or anything change or recognize after we've gone through this bit?
Just what you said before, he's God and we're not.
He's God, we're not. Yep. So good. Yeah, that's a good way to figure out.
He's God.
Yeah, Connie?
Well, maybe somebody's already said this, because a lot of times I don't respond because I can't hear what's being said. For me, to fear God means to respect God and also to fear offending Him.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so to respect God, but also,
You don't want to offend Him.
yeah, fearing offending God. Which I think we talked a little bit about, that it was, that was much more prevalent, visible, easy to see in Old Testament Bible times than it is now. I mean, we're not necessarily as afraid of offending God as we used to be.
I was going to say, I think it's not to take his name in vain.
Yeah.
Because it seems like there's a lot of people around that just throw out his name in disrespect. And we should reverence to it.
Yeah, so part of that fearing and loving God is that, yeah, using His name well with respect, which, right, Old Testament, you couldn't say God's name that Moses got at the burning bush, so they made up this other name that they would say, so in order to avoid using. They were so afraid of offending God by misusing His name that they just didn't say His name at all. God says, no, use my name in prayer and praise, thanksgiving. But yeah, we can use it in other ways. I don't remember the details. There's some pastor had a story about a school kid who his only association with Jesus was that was a swear word his friends said at a basketball game, and just because that was where that context is. And so, yeah, not misusing God's name, and not misusing God's name in other ways too. I swear to God this is true, even if you're lying through your teeth. Saying, well, this is definitively God's will, when there could be some debate on that. It'd be easy to do that kind of stuff too. But yeah, no, fearing God's name, fearing God, not offending Him, using His name well, and not misusing it. Right? Anything else? Any other thoughts there?
When I was in confirmation, when we talked about this, the one thing I remember was he said, be sure that you just always remember fear is love, the highest order of love. And I don't remember if there was other stuff around that, but I just never forgot that. When you read it, I can replace the word with love, and it still works.
Okay, so yeah, fear and love that kind of go together too, kind of that recognition. Good. All right, Jesus was focused on His mission. Again, part of why He didn't care about what other people thought about Him, only cared about what God thought about Him. What helps you focus on a goal, and what sidetracks you? Yeah. Prayer, okay. I'm assuming that's one of the things that helps focus you and doesn't sidetrack you too much.
What'd you say?
That helps you focus, doesn't sidetrack you?
It's not the sidetrack.
Yeah.
Sidetracks?
No, okay, but no, yeah, prayer.
Getting too busy busy. with-
Yes.
with
Yeah,
what I
no,
have
that,
to do for
prayer-
my immediate
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. No, prayer is, prayer helps focus. What Luther said, I've got so much to do, I have to spend twice as much time praying in the morning, so I can get everything done. Even if people will say that prayer seems more like it's something sidetracking you. But yeah, no, busyness is certainly something that can, you've got your goal, you got something you think what you need to do, and then, well, there's all these other, many things that are going on that keep you from doing that. Yeah. Anything else? Lots of technology too. We talked about a little social media earlier. That can be distracting. The ways to be ever connected, or the ways of how can I share this to make me look good, or that kind of thing.
Doing it first.
What?
Doing it first.
Doing it first. Okay.
In other words, if I
Yeah.
pull it off, then
Yep.
it's easy to get sidetracked. Not get-
Yep. Yeah. Doing things first, and not letting other things get in the way. Yep. All right. All right. What does it mean for you that Jesus not only makes you fit for heaven, but also saves you from hell?
You're not going to be.
Yeah. Fit for heaven. You're not going to go to hell, be in hell. Yep. Right.
Was it makes me humble?
Yeah. Humble. Yep. Cool. All right. All right. Any other final thoughts, questions, comments? All right. Sounds good. Thanks for coming, for setting your clocks the correct way, and
Yes.
and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.